Thank you for this invitation and to have the opportunity to share with you a few considerations on the possibility to renew the welfare state and the idea that we have about the welfare state, the traditional, the public welfare state. So in order to tackle this, try to answer to these questions, I will touch upon four main points. First of all, I would like to explain what we mean for a new approach to this process of renewal of the welfare state that we call second welfare or secondo welfare within our observatory. I'm the director of this observatory on the second welfare in Italy, and basically my speech, what I'm going to say is very much related with what we are doing within this laboratory observatory, research observatory, based both at the University of Milan but also within a research center here in Torino. The second point I want to touch is to see if I'm able to identify some inspiring principles that are at the basis of this new approach or this new paradigm in terms of renewal of the welfare, and also to see which are the actors, the main protagonists of this new process. I would say some few words on the Italian situation in order to give you some evidences of what does it mean to develop a second welfare within the Italian context. And I will finish my intervention with a few words on the future perspective of this new approach. So let's start from the idea that it's possible to shift from a more traditional kind of welfare state, we can call the first welfare state, to a second welfare. The starting point, the genesis of this process is very much related with the quite recent crisis, the crisis of the 2007-2008, that was both an economic and a social crisis that has two phases. On the one hand, the reduction of public expenditures, so less resources, less public resources, and the introduction of new budgetary constraints, and on the other hand, the emergence of new risks and new needs, and the impoverishment of families that are put under pressure of this economic and social crisis. So if the situation, the context in which we are now is one of budget constraints, increasing needs, and a call for social investment, the question is what to do. And a possible answer is the idea to move it, to extend the perimeter of social protection by promoting the development of, in fact, we call second welfare next to the first welfare. So not in idea of confrontation and opposition between the two spheres, the first and the second one, but in order to implement and develop something that is a way, an instrument, tools to renew the welfare state, giving space to a second sphere that we call second welfare. So in order to explain what we mean for second welfare, I move to a definition. And in fact, second welfare can be considered a mix of innovative social programs, mainly financed by non-public resources. So public resources are still important, but cannot be considered the only source of financial resources. This mix of innovative social programs are devoted to help and invest in vulnerable individuals facing especially new social risks and needs, but also, of course, to cope and to face the more traditional risks. This mix of innovative social programs are provided by a variety of different economic and social actors and different stakeholders based and rooted in local territories and communities, as already has been very well explained also from the previous two speeches. But these economic and social actors and stakeholders are mutually connected and interconnected. And the final dimension, the final element that can be taken into consideration in order to define second welfare is the fact that local and regional authorities are called to play a crucial role. So the public institutions, especially at the local level, are not in the way to disappear, but actually have to change their role within this complex process. In fact, they have to be at the center of the scene and to play a role of coordination and a very important role in terms of promotion of a new multi-stakeholder and multi-level governance model that have to be implemented at the subnational level. So we can argue and discuss if second welfare can be considered a new paradigm. From my point of view, the answer is yes, in the sense that we can we can identify three different dimensions, different connotations that can help us to understand in which sense second welfare can be considered, start to be considered a new paradigm. First of all, a temporal connotation. In fact, there is a sort of continuity between the first public and traditional welfare state and the second welfare. The first one was rooted in the past, especially very much linked with the phase of the so-called glorious 30s, when the welfare state was very much developed. But after that period, there was a very serious crisis, the 70s crisis, and the situation in terms of welfare started to change very much and very deeply. So, in terms of more than two decades, emerged the necessity to transform the welfare state. And at the end of the 90s, during the 2000, the necessity to rethink and to renew the welfare state emerged as the priorities for all the welfare states in Europe and, of course, also in our country. The second connotation is a functional connotation, in the sense that second welfare adds up to the schemes of the first welfare, so still we have a very much interconnection, fills the gaps, stimulates modernization, experimenting new organizational, management, financial models, and breaks into spaces of unexplorable and hardly reachable needs. So something that where the first welfare has failed, there is a chance, the opportunity for the second welfare to represent those opportunities that has been explained and illustrated also with the project Fa Bene. And third, a financial connotation. In fact, second welfare is able, and there are evidences on this respect, to mobilize additional non-public resources made available by a variety of economic and social actors, as I said. I move quickly to the inspiring principle at the basis of this new approach. First of all, I want to go back still to the 70s and to a very famous book of Ralph Dahrendorf, The New Liberty. And Dahrendorf was saying at that moment, I quote, "The economic situation of many families allows to look for a new balance between services offered and financed by the community and the contribution of people and civil society associations. So also in the 70s and following in the 80s, in the 90s, it was very much clear, especially within the debate and within the academia, the importance of the involvement of civil societies, of different actors, non-public actors, in terms of recovery of a welfare state in crisis. The second inspiring principle, or a set of inspiring principles, has to do with social investment. And on this respect, I'm referring to the Economic Commission communication on social investment, a quite recent one. And from that source, I have picked up and choose some elements that I think are very much related to what we are saying, we are discussing today in this context. First of all, I want to stress that the European Union recognizes that resources for social policies are not limited to those from the public sector, but a non-negligible part comes from people and families, first element. The second one is that non-profit organizations and social enterprises can complement public sector efforts and be pioneers in developing new markets. So here we have the link between the social dimension and the economic dimension, and the fact that one of the major goals of the European Union and the action within the member state has to make concrete this link and interconnection between the social sphere and the economic one. And then also there is a part and role for-profit actors. In fact, the for-profit parts of the private sector would need to be further encouraged to use the potential for social investment. So we have to recognize that also private actors have something to say in terms of social dimension, social investment, and social innovation. And going on this aspect, I want to stress that social innovation, in fact, another key words to be taken into consideration, and social investment are not limited to corporate social responsibility alone, but both social innovation and social investment include, for example, job training, in-house childcare facilities, health promotion, work-life balance measures, which are part of the story of the social risk and social needs, and accessible and family-friendly workplaces. So we have, let's say, a set of risk and needs much more wider than what we had in the past, when the first welfare, the traditional welfare, was born and developed. In the social area, member states have to make wider use of more innovative approaches to financing, including by using participation of the private sector and financial engineering through instruments such as microfinance. I'm thinking here about, for example, social impact bonds that are a kind of experimental or pilot project under experimentation in different countries, also in our country, in Italy. But also I'm thinking about policy-based guarantees and social investment boards, which would strive for budgetary savings, because the problem is also to think how to save money, to save resources, to use in a better way, a more rational way, resources which are scarce. And finally, about the inspiring principle, I want to stress the linkages between social innovation and social investment, saying that enabling individuals to live up to their full potential, to take part in the social economic life, and also into the society, entails supporting people at the critical juncture of their lives. This means that we have to invest in, first of all, in children and youth, and from that point onwards, of course, to take into consideration all the other parts of the individual's life cycle. So second welfare is very much related with this idea of continuity and of the individual life cycles in order to face the problem in different needs that emerge in the different phases of the life of the individuals. And finally, that social innovation must be an integral part of necessary adjustment by testing new policy approaches and selecting the most effective ones. Starting from this inspiring principle, we can identify what we can consider the three main pillars of the second welfare. As you can see from this slide, I have identified these three main pillars in the openness to non-public actors. That means to involve the market and the third sector next to the state, and also to experiment, to foster the experimentation of new multi-level and multi-stakeholder models of governance. The second pillar is empowerment, citizen and beneficiaries empowerment. So here the idea is to involve the citizens and the beneficiaries of the benefit that are made available for the people in needs in the process of implementation of the welfare intervention, but also take into consideration and to foster the idea that where is possible, citizens have to become much more responsible, as we have already said, and also has to to co-finance the welfare intervention. Of course, when it's possible, where we are not speaking about the more severe kind of poverty. And final, social innovation is the third pillar that we have to consider. In this way, we can at least try to move from social protection, okay, that is very much related with the more traditional kind of welfare state, to social investment, where for social investment we are taking into consideration the two dimensions, the way to answer to the new risk and to the new needs, but also to make the welfare an instrument in order to make the economic growth and therefore the social growth possible, the employment growth a reality. And is of course a way to overcome the traditional approach of assistantialism, a welfare much more based on the idea to be really in support of the people without asking anything back from the people that are assisted. So here I don't want to go into details, but you find the 5 dimensions that are necessary, that are fundamental in order to move, to shift from social protection and social investment. I want just to say a few words on the final point and stress the idea that in terms of economic and social actors, here the challenge is to make them allies and supplemental to the public sphere, and co-protagonists of the welfare redesign and re-elaboration in this process of renewal, and also to invite them to promote their participation in terms of co-production and co-management of the interventions. In this sense, as you can see from the following slide, here we have tried to identify a list of these economic and social actors that have something to say within the welfare arena. They, of course, have already in the past played a role, but now they are really the protagonist next to the state, of course, not alone. In terms of public and private partnerships, in terms of networking, in terms of new form of public and private partnership. Okay, yeah, almost at the end. And as you can see from this list, which is not complete, it's just to give you an idea. You can also see how these different actors can play within this complex process a different role. We have some actors that have a role in terms of financing this new form of welfare, but also in terms of redesigning of in terms of planification and rethinking the ideas and the principle at the basis of the welfare state and the intervention at the local level. And then in terms of citizens, the idea that we have to think how to mobilize private earnings in more efficient forms, and also to overcome the idea that all the benefit have to be free of charge for the people. And then we have a set of actors. I'm thinking about social business, cooperatives, charities, and church-based organizations that have to rethink their role in terms of provision of services, social services, in a way that is very much different from the past. And then finally, we have to take into consideration the role of the subnational institution. First of all, the regional level and the local governments. In this sense, it's important to think that they have to play a new role in terms of coordination, first of all, in terms of regulation of this new form of partnership, public and private partnerships, and also monitoring and evaluation of this new pilot project and experimentation at the local level. I want to say, coming to the conclusion, a few words also. Okay, just to I give you this slide in order to think and to explain that there are policy areas that we can consider more hospitable for second welfare initiatives. And as you can see, without entering into details, that we can move from education and training, employment, reconciling work and private life, workplace adaptation, to social economy, that is very much at the topic of your week here in Italy, and also inclusion, health and housing. So very much different areas that all can compose this sort of puzzle in where the territories and the communities are very much involved. And as I say, coming to the conclusion, I want to stress two main points. Saying that I'm going further to the other, this one. I want also to underline, to stress that, of course, this new paradigm and this process of renewal of the welfare state has also put inside also some risks and some open issues. We have to be aware of the fact that it's not so easy to implement second welfare initiatives and second welfare project and experimentation. So I have listed a few, at least the main risk that we can encounter, we can find on our road towards renewal of the welfare state. First of all, of course, a risk very much related with the relationship between the first sphere, first welfare, and the second welfare. Here, the risk is the illusion that everything can be solved and done within the second welfare. Well, we are not speaking and talking about this possibility. Of course, the first welfare is still very much important, but what we need today is a very strong, much more stronger connection between the two arenas, the first and the second arena. The second risk is that following this road, this new paradigm, the gap between the insider and outsider, the people that are already within the labor market and benefit from the first welfare and also from the second welfare, and those that are outside the second welfare, the welfare and the labor market, are much more penalized. Here, the challenge is to avoid this, the possibility that the gap will be much more widened. But on the contrary, we have to reduce the gap. The third risk is the territorial differentiation. In fact, we know, and you know, that Italy, especially in Italy, we have this traditional gap, northern-south gap, and territorial differentiation, and we don't want that second welfare and the renewal welfare state will become a further element to also in this case increase the territorial differentiation. On the contrary, we want to reduce and to export and diffuse second welfare opportunities also in the southern region. Then there is a risk of connected with networking. As you are aware, as you know, it's very difficult to put in place partnership between actors, different stakeholders that have a different interest. So networking is quite difficult, and there is a risk of fragmentation, of the emergence of different pilot projects here and there without a connection, without the attempt to diffuse the best practices and not to start every time from the beginning without micro project, small project within very narrow and very micro communities and territories. And finally, another two risks. One is related with monitoring, evaluation. They are very much important, but here in Italy we are not very used to able to put in place monitoring and evaluation, experimentation. So it's very much important, especially for second welfare, to start from the beginning with also attention and a bit of resources in order to start from the beginning with solution in terms of monitoring and evaluation mechanism. And finally, the fact that Italy has a lot of things to do in terms of reach and reach the social investment paradigm. So we are very much further from this scope and objective, and in this sense we can speak about incomplete understanding and adhesion to the social investment paradigm. So in terms of comparison between other member states, of course we have a lot of things to learn from other experiences. So coming to the very end and to the very conclusion, I want to stress that in this sense it's very much and it's very necessary to invest from experimental and pilot project. First of all, is a very good starting point, but it's just the first phase. From that, from this kind of experience, we have to move to stable programs that can count on a continuous flow of resources. So the problem of sustainability is at the center of the scene, is at the center of the debate, and it's of course very much important to think about how to and where to find resources in order to transform what is a pilot project in a stable and durable program. And then, as I said, just said, monitor and evaluation in order to build up a system, as it was said before, in order to put in place systemic action where otherwise we have a fragmentation landscape. In this sense, so it's important to invest in contribution to greater dissemination and replication of those practices which appear positive and virtuous, avoid duplication, avoid to replace, to reproduce the same kind of experience here and there, and finally foster collaboration, partnership, multi-stakeholder model of governance between actors operating in the same territories, but also cross-fertilization between different territories and communities. I stop here. Maybe you can find more slides in my presentation, but I leave the floor to the discussion. Thank you.
Molte le cose che ci sono state dette. Pensando ai Balcani, la cosa che più mi colpisce è la necessità di fare qualcosa a fianco di ciò che stiamo facendo con un nostro ruolo specifico.
So many things has been said. When I think about the Balkans, I'm very hit by this need, this necessity to do something close to what we are already doing. So something that is new, but at the same time we have to continue what we are already doing.
E queste cose che ci sono specifiche sono anzitutto non solo pubblico, ma tanti attori, tanti ruoli, tra cui anche quello della Chiesa.
These specific things are the following. One is the fact we are not just involving or waiting for the public assistance. There is a lot of actors, and in the role of these actors there is also the role of the church.
Secondo, la dimensione funzionale di quello che andiamo a fare, non solo una dimensione, diciamo così, operativa ed immediata.
The second element is the functional dimension of what we are going to do, and not only the operational dimension, so just the implementation of something.
Terzo, la continuità dei percorsi delle persone con il loro empowerment.
The third element is the continuity of the paths together with the people in their empowerment processes.
E infine la volontà dell'investimento sociale da parte della Chiesa locale come strumento di evangelizzazione e di promozione del territorio.
And the fourth element is the will of in the social investment promoted by the local church as an instrument of evangelization but also promotion of human being.
Ringraziamo le nostre tre ospiti per questa prima parte di contributi.
I would like to thank all the three speakers for this first round of the contributions.
Lascio la parola a lui che ci conduce in questo momento per capire dove dobbiamo andare e cosa dobbiamo fare.
I will leave the floor to me. Very simply, we have a few minutes more before the break, and I think it is a nice opportunity to ask something to these speakers. We will have the opportunity then also later on to move the discussion, but if something is not probably clear now or you want to give your own contribution to the discussion, feel free to use these 10 minutes we have before the break in order to especially Miss Maino is just now here. Later she will move. So if you have some question for her, feel free to do it. Are you shy?
It was very interesting because we heard first, the public sector and quickly done in the last, especially the last 5 or 6 years, and then the tier which is behind this. I imagine with my colleague now that we need time to connect. This is the exercise probably we will have to do on our own now, because the two things now are not connecting in our mind, in the sense that this effort all over the week is to completely feel that this connection. So I imagine that probably now in the break also we will have to discuss a little bit, because it will be very, it's the key that makes us the differences. It's very easy to say, you know, for us, this is what happened and this is what is the view. But how then in other territories, which is not the city of Torino, these things that you were saying could develop. And I was wondering how much in other territories of Italy this is going on.
I was thinking that there is a slide, I call it the second welfare cloud. Okay, here is maybe the connection, because the idea in the cloud you see the name, the denomination of some projects as fa bene, or other experiences and projects, initiatives that have been put in place in the local government in Turin, but in other towns and municipalities in Italy. And so the idea of this slide was in fact to show the linkages between let's say the theory and this let's say attempt to explain in terms of theorizing the changes of the welfare state and the second welfare, and what we are really very much at the center of our research. In fact, we are doing research on specific programs that are in fact listed here. And so next to the cloud, you see the needs and the risk that are at the center of these initiatives. So in a way, this can be considered the linkages we are looking for, and also it's not express the place and the territories, but in fact we are studying and researching second welfare in all the territories in Italy, also in the south, in the southern region, where, of course, as I said, the second welfare is very much less developed, but still we found very interesting and very innovative projects and initiatives. And the other aspect is that if we go back to the list of actors, we can, of course, saying that there are sort of different parts and bits of second welfare. We are referring to the company-based welfare, we are referring to the role of the church, and we are looking specifically what the churches how the churches can contribute to the second welfare, and then also the third sectors, and how, for example, all these actors can work all together within these networks and partnerships.
I'm interested in the concept of individuals and families contributing, and I just wonder if we can talk in more practical terms in terms of what that actually means, who's actually contributing to what areas of welfare.
So for us, individuals and families are at the very center of the reasoning, and also of the projects and of the initiatives, because they very often they are part of the project, they are involved. Of course, they are the beneficiary of the intervention, the welfare intervention, but we see that more often they are called to take part in a way, or co-financing, or also playing a specific role within the project in terms of volunteering, or in terms of playing a role in the designing and the process of definition of the intervention at the local level. Of course, not all the people, not all the families, but what is evident from the impact of the crisis is that the family cannot be only the final objectives, and they are not only important because they pay taxes and for that reason they are entitled to receive rights and benefits, but they have to contribute in a much more direct way. So in all the projects, or in many of the projects we have taken into consideration in our research, is very much evident this role of individuals and families.
So could you give some examples of when you envisage someone would give financial, because I just imagine there's not that many areas within the social welfare system where actually the same people are benefiting are also able to contribute financially.
Yeah, for example, if we think about the topic of work-life balance, so within the what we call company-based welfare, the idea is to help the families, especially the women, to reconcile their duties within the labor market, but also the duties in terms of families and children on the one hand and elderly people on the other. And in this sense, they can accept a different kind of contract or to contribute to the welfare benefits within the labor market, within the enterprises and the firms. And on the other hand, they can have new and different and innovative benefits that have they are not been entitled in the past in a more traditional welfare state. So this is a discourse, this is a debate very much developing in Italy at the moment that is showing how also private enterprises, also medium-sized enterprises can be very much involved within this renewal of the welfare state. Or, for example, projects like Fa.Bene or other projects at the local level, they see the families involved because on the one hand they receive benefits, on the other they have to share hours and time availability in terms to help other families much more in need, for example.